Hello, and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Eric Landrum, along with Garth Neufeld, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the end stuff. This is episode number 141, where Garth had the opportunity to interview Carolyn Brown Kramer from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska. Before you hear the interview, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. Now, it was really fun to listen to this interview, clearly done at NITOP in 2022, between Carolyn and Garth. Carolyn was in her 6th year at UNL, although when I say 6th year, as she points out at the beginning of the interview, it's a little bit more complicated than that. She did her master's degree there. She served as an adjunct there, and she's currently serving as an associate professor of practice, or what they call a POP. And there are actually 4 POPs, and she called that her teaching clique. It was really kind of heartwarming to hear Carolyn talk so well and so highly about Lincoln, Nebraska. That is clearly her hometown. She was born and raised there. She went to public schools there. A lot of times we poo-poo the town that we're in, even though we enjoy it. Oftentimes we'll tease with our friends or publicly about how we don't care for it, but she doesn't feel that way. In fact, what's interesting is that Carolyn talks about this a little bit later in the episode, about how she leverages her knowledge of the hometown for her introductory psychology students, such as asking the local students what high school they went to, or even helping new students to the community, helping them with maybe local doctors or mechanics and things like that. And so it was really great to hear her talk so positively about her hometown. She used a phrase that I've heard before, but not very often, that in her family, she's had the challenge of the two-body problem. You might have heard this before. I'm not going to give that away. I want you to listen for that because I think it's really good. Carolyn and Garth talk a lot about introductory psychology because that's been her bread and butter for the past 6 years, although Carolyn does teach other courses, and I think she has a fairly heavy teaching load, even for someone whose primary teaching responsibilities are all teaching, that is, the professor of practice. Although I do know, and they didn't really talk about it, that Carolyn does research as well and has published some really important research regarding what she does in the classroom. So it was really great to hear them talk about how she does innovations in her teaching and how she's always kind of thinking about what can she do next and what can she do better in her course. And it was great to hear her talk about some of those exercises. And she gave some really great examples, like in the personality section of her course, and how she can use the Big Five and things like that. And those are really great things for you to listen for. I appreciated that as part of her service, not only does Carolyn mention the Faculty Senate a couple of times, but she also coordinates a departmental brown bag. And one of the sessions they had, I believe it was at the end of the fall 2021 semester, was that they had a guest speaker who came in and talked about compassion fatigue at their brown bag and finding that balance between what professors can provide to students and giving compassion, but then also being compassionate towards themselves. And being compassionate doesn't always mean just giving a student everything they ask for. And I thought Garth and Carolyn had a really important conversation here. And I know I've seen some other people on social media. I think Regan Gurung posted some things maybe around the new year about this exact same topic. And so I think that's an important conversation for us to keep having. Carolyn also talked about some of your future academic plans, where that might be a sabbatical opportunity or to change it up and teach some different courses. I think when we teach the same thing over and over, we can love it, but we can also get burnt out on it. And so I appreciated her candor in talking about that. I also appreciated that she talked about sabbatical plans. That is, this ability that we have in higher ed to take a deeper dive when we're given that opportunity to have a sabbatical. And she talked about aligning herself with some of the IPI, Introductory Psychology Initiative outcomes through APA in terms of reinventing her intro psych course. But the thing that really piqued my interest is that she wanted to take a deeper dive into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I appreciate about that is that I think many instructors, if not most, have tried to be more mindful about this. But I think a sabbatical really gives people the time and the space to think about it deeply. I think when we try to add things on, sometimes even for the best possible reasons, if we don't do it deeply and without careful thought, either we do it haphazardly or we can do it and sometimes have harm that we never intended. So I love the idea of taking a sabbatical and taking part of a slice of a year-long sabbatical and just thinking about how could she infuse this in all of her courses. And knowing Carolyn, she'll probably find a way to share that somehow with the STP community because she's very generous that way with her time and talents. So please enjoy this interview from Psych Sessions.
This episode of the Psych Sessions podcast is brought to you by Macmillan Learning Psychology. Introducing Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology, setting a whole new standard for integrating assessments, activities, and analytics into your teaching. Available for instructor review now and for student purchase this summer. Achieve brings together everything instructors and students love about their digital course content, including interactive ebooks, learning curve, adaptive quizzing, additional assessments, activities that emphasize critical thinking and scientific reasoning, a brand new video collection, and more. All in a powerful yet easy to use new platform. See for yourself. We'd love to know what you think about Achieve. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions to sign up for a review activity. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning. Listeners, we want to invite you to be among the first to know who and what's coming up on the Psych Sessions podcast. Join our opt-in email list, just like hundreds of psychology instructors have already done. We promise not to fill your inboxes. When we email you bi-weekly or monthly, it will be something that means something. From new series announcements to new opportunities, we invite you to join the mission to get free, high-quality professional development to all teachers of psychology. So sign up for our opt-in email list. Just go to bit.ly/psych sessions-email. That's all lowercase, bit.ly/psych sessions-email. Well, it's my pleasure to be here with Dr. Carolyn Brown Kramer from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Yes.
In Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yep.
How long have you been there for?
I am in my 6th year. Although it's a little bit of a complex story because I was an adjunct there previously and I went to graduate school there. So 6 years plus some more.
Okay, wait. So you went to grad school there, you became an adjunct there, and then you got a tenure track job there.
No.
Okay. No.
So the first part is right. I went to graduate school there, but I finished dissertating from afar. So my first master's level coursework was there. And then I was still enrolled, but I did my dissertation work elsewhere. I moved to Illinois with my spouse for 4 years. He had a tenure track position at another institution there.
Oh, you're both faculty.
Yes, two-body problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 4 years, our older son was born, and we said, gosh, it's really hard being away from family, being away from friends. So we decided to move back to our hometown, which is Lincoln, Nebraska. very Lincoln-oriented person. And he left academia altogether. I couldn't find anything immediately, so I did a year in industry. I did about 4 years of adjuncting at local institutions. I sort of made the rounds. Then I spent a year as an assistant professor at Bellevue University up the road in Bellevue, Nebraska. And then I accepted my current position at University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
And what's your title at the university now?
I am now an associate professor of practice. So that's technically not tenure track, but it's a renewable, non-tenure track teaching-oriented job.
Okay. How big is the department there, roughly? 36 or 38 or something. And how many of you are there?
How many POPs? There are 4 POPs now.
Okay.
So it's a great, fantastic group. The 4 of us are really close. We talk a lot. We collaborate a lot. Our offices are right by each other. But we're sort of the teaching clique among the primarily research faculty in our department.
Who are those 3 colleagues of yours?
So actually, Chelsea Witt was here at the conference. She did a poster with 2 of her undergraduate students. Amanda Williamson, she did a teaching slam from afar via Zoom, and she also had a pie that ended up splatting in her face. The technology didn't work.
Oh, no.
And then our 4th POP is Jackie O'Melian, and she wasn't at NITOP this year, but she's fantastic.
I had the opportunity to work with Amanda on some resources for a textbook, and it was great to see her work. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Do you know, I'm just going to, like, whatever my associations are, and you can feel free to take a drink of water. I'll talk for a second. Do you know Rob McIntyre then?
Yes.
You do?
Yes. Rob and I have chatted a number of times. He is, there was actually just an article in the local newspaper about him because he was a teacher at the one of the local high schools. He became an administrator, and he's been in admin for several years now, and he just started to move back into the classroom. And so he was profiled in the local newspaper for advocating for more public school administrators to get in the classroom and teach 1 or 2 classes to keep their skills fresh, to stay connected to the faculty, to stay connected to the students.
Yeah. He's such... first of all, I think he's probably an excellent teacher, but he is also just the way he thinks about education is so fresh. I love hearing conversations that he and Eric has on psych sessions, and then he's just really easy to talk teaching with, and he has all kinds of great ideas about assessment. And so I've never been to Lincoln. I'd love to go. My wife was a flight attendant once upon a time, and she would fly into Lincoln, I think, on SkyWest, like small airline.
Yeah, I can believe it.
Okay. So, and she really liked it there. So what is Lincoln like?
Lincoln is growing. It's a small city. We're about right about 250,000 people right now. We're about an hour from the biggest city in Nebraska, which is Omaha. And if you include all of the suburbs, Omaha's maybe about 1 million. So clearly smaller communities than a lot of places around the country. But Lincoln is interesting. We're sort of a blue dot in a red state. There are 2 blue dots. There's the blue dot of Lincoln. There's the blue dot of Omaha in a predominantly red state. So that can be a really interesting dynamic politically. It can also set up battles, I guess, between the, primarily conservative state legislature versus these blue pockets, and how do we how do the population centers of the state interact with the more rural agricultural areas of the state? But
that's
Lincoln,
interesting. We in Washington State, everybody thinks about Washington State, thinks about Seattle.
Sure.
Seattle's so blue, like so blue.
Yes.
But a large portion of our state is not blue. And if you drive 1 hour east, it's a whole different world out there.
Yeah.
So I think this is just a really interesting phenomenon in the United States. I mean, probably other places. Actually, I know it's in other places too. Thailand has something similar with their population. But okay, anyway, so what else about Lincoln? Because you're very familiar with it. You're from there.
Yes.
You returned to there.
Yes.
Yeah. So families there.
Families there, yeah.
Families are close knit, Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, let me put in my little plug for Lincoln. Lincoln is growing. It is that we have a fantastic public education system, public school system, well-funded, great parks. And, it doesn't have the lure of mountains or oceans, but it's just really beautiful. It has all 4 seasons, hot summers, cold winters, but nothing like, Texas summers or Minnesota winter. So it's a little bit more moderate.
Yeah.
We have we have a big performing arts center. We have a new arena. And so we're bringing all these big acts to Lincoln. So it's really started to put the entertainment, we're sort of an entertainment scene now. The university is a big draw, of course. But it's also known as, it's called the Silicon Prairie. We're starting to develop that moniker. So
Okay.
there are a growing number of tech startups that are being very successful because we tend to have pretty low taxes, low cost of living. And so we're having this huge investment of entrepreneurship growing there in Lincoln and Omaha in that area.
What is one thing that came out of Lincoln that I would know about?
That you would know about?
I'm thinking entertainer. I'm thinking famous politician. I'm thinking I don't know. I'm putting you on the spot now. It's not fair.
Well, Gerald Ford was from Omaha.
Okay.
The lead singer of Maroon 5 is from Lincoln.
Oh. Adam somebody?
Yeah, Adam
whatever.
Somebody.
Okay.
Kool-Aid was invented just down the road in Hastings, Nebraska.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that we're locally known for. There's this, anybody who comes through Nebraska has to eat a runza, and anybody from Nebraska knows, oh my God, runza! And everybody else is like, what the heck?
What is that?
It is, it's a pocket of dough filled with ground beef, cabbage, and spices.
And what do you
so
call
sort
it?
of like a pierogi.
Yeah.
The brand name is it's called a runza.
Okay, a runza.
And there's all different versions of them, but runza is sort of like the Nebraska food.
And it's baked or is it boiled?
It's baked.
It's baked.
Oh,
Okay.
boiled. Ooh, no.
No, because I come
Baked.
from a family
Yeah.
of pierogies, but pierogies are boiled,
Yes.
but pierogies are baked.
Really?
Well, in Seattle they are anyway. I don't know. But yeah, that's neat. Okay. So you have deep roots in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that kind of shapes the way that you, the way that you relate to students. You're very familiar. Because lots of people, if I would be teaching in the town I grew up in, yeah, I don't know how that would affect me differently. Do you have any insight about what it's like to work here versus work in a different city that you were unfamiliar with?
Yeah, I mean, for 4 years when my spouse and I moved to Illinois, we were in a completely foreign, not foreign in the sense that we didn't know the culture, but it was a very different community. We'd never lived there before. One thing that's fun about living in my hometown is when students say where they're from, they'll say, I'm from whatever town. And if they say I'm from Lincoln, I'll say, oh, what high school did you go to? And they look at me like professors don't care what high school I went to. But whenever they went to the same high school as me, I say, go Rockets! They're like,
Right.
oh, you're a Rocket too. So it's
Yeah.
kind of fun. We have that little bit in common. But because I was born and raised in Lincoln, went to college just outside of Lincoln, went to grad school in Lincoln, I like to share tips and do you know this place in town, or do you remember when that used to exist, or definitely food recommendations, restaurant recommendations. So that's kind of fun whenever I interact with first year students who are not from Lincoln.
Yeah.
I'll say, if you're looking for XYZ kinds of food, if you need a medical provider, if you need a good mechanic recommendation, let me know. So it feels like I've been living there. It sort of feels like I'm a faculty member who's been working there for much longer because I've been living in Lincoln for much longer.
Yeah. Do you draw students a lot, from rural Nebraska a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then do you have a lot of students from out of state? And
We have a decent number. I don't know the breakdown. I would say there's a large chunk of small town Nebraska. There's a large chunk of Lincoln and Omaha, the, two big-ish cities for Nebraska. And then, like most Midwest universities, we get a lot of draw from the Midwest.
Yeah.
Then we get a few people, from the everywhere else in the country, and then everywhere else in the world.
University of Nebraska-Lincoln. There must be a University of Nebraska dash something else.
Yes, there are 4 different campuses. So we have one in Omaha. There's University of Nebraska Medical Center, which is also in Omaha, but it has a different name, and University of Nebraska-Kearney, which is in a smaller city up the road a ways. So we have 4 campuses.
How are those campuses managed? I mean, maybe you don't know this. Like, is there a central?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
We have a central administration, the university president, and then each campus has its own chancellor, and then the chancellor has deans, and the deans have associate deans and provosts and whatnot. So yeah, we do definitely have a central administration. We have a board of regents that makes decisions for the entire university community, but because University of Nebraska-Lincoln is the flagship campus, we tend to we get a little bit more of the attention. We get a little bit more of the scrutiny. I think sometimes the other campuses feel shortchanged because, they don't get as much of that focus. And so we're trying, among other things, I'm on the faculty senate at UNL. And so we have conversations among ourselves for the Lincoln faculty, but we also have communications with the faculty at the other 3 campuses to make sure that we're trying to make things equitable. We're trying not to steal the spotlight. We're trying to really collaborate with the other campuses as well.
Yeah, that would be complicated. More complicated than just having the one campus or something like that, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to us about what do you teach? What do you do there? What do you love to do as part of your job?
Yeah, so the answer to that is evolving a little bit. Over the first 6 years that I've been there, each fall I have taught a large introduction to psychology section. When I say large, it's usually between 400 and 420 students. So it is I have taught it in a performing arts center. So I am literally the sage on the stage, spotlight, mic, 2 large screens. I pace back and forth across this 50-foot stage, and I am 100 feet away from many of my students. So they're in the very back. They're in the dark. They're in the balcony. Yeah. They don't have, the space is not great. We don't have desks for students to write on, so they're writing on their laps. But the university is building a new campus building, and we're told it should be ready in fall that should seat 350 or something. So we should have a fantastic teaching-oriented space for those big classes.
So I'm going out on a limb. I'm probably wrong, but I'm going to ask, do you have a theater background?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I have some vocal music background and instrumental music background, but I never did theater. Okay. Actually, the worst grade I got in high school was in my theater class.
Oh, no. What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't know if I missed a bunch of assignments or what. Actually, my two C's in high school were theater and career education, of all things. Those were my 2 lowest grades in high school. It was hilarious.
Maybe in theater, if you don't do well, they're just like, you are really good just who you are.
Oh, sure. Yes, I love that interpretation.
Okay, so the theater, though, is not owned it's a theater, performing arts center now.
It's a performing arts center. It's on campus. Okay. Yes.
But they just needed... Psychology's popular. They didn't plan to be in that room, obviously.
It's the only space on campus that will accommodate a class that large. Yes. Until this new, actually we just built the College of Business just built a new building. And my understanding is there's a very large auditorium in there, but it's controlled by the College of Business, and my College Arts and Sciences doesn't have any say over or use of that space.
Yeah. So this changes your, potentially, I know we're in the middle of asking you what you do, but moving a space that significantly is going to change the way you approach teaching, right?
Yes.
It's got to.
Yes. Although I will say I am no longer going to be teaching that humongous class. So it'll be somebody else's, I was going to say problem, but more like somebody else's opportunity to really have an educational space for that very large class.
Okay. So then we want to talk about the future, I think. Maybe. I don't know. We can talk about the past. But so how was that 420 student class organized?
It was
You?
A beast.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a beast. So many moving parts, which is why after doing it for 6 years, it's been a good experience, but I'm happy to share the rotation with someone else, let's say. So I have... It's complicated. The first few years I taught the class, it was me and 4 graduate teaching assistants from the Department of Psychology. And in addition to lecture in the Big Performing Arts Center, we also had recitation sections. So these smaller discussion or lab sections of about 25 or 30 students each. So given the class size, we had 16 different recitation sections meeting throughout the week, each led by a graduate TA, and then also an honor section that I taught. So lots of moving parts, TAs having to keep track of 4, they each taught 4 different sections, and students would sometimes hop from one recitation section to another, or they'd oversleep and they'd go to a different class. And so it was just an organizational challenge to try to keep track of who is going to which section and did they complete their work, and how did that happen. And it was also a challenge. It was a big challenge for the TAs because they never knew how many people were going to be there that day, right? And so an activity that works well for 20 or 25 might not work with 4 students or 6 students who came to the Friday 8 a.m. recitation section. So that was a big challenge.
Okay, so let me just see if I got this straight.
Yeah.
I keep telling everybody that I'm at a community college and I teach 30 students. So so they come to the lecture.
Yes.
And then are they working some of that stuff out later in these recitations?
Okay.
Yep. Meetings of their choice. They can go to anyone they want.
Well, they register for one. They're
Okay.
supposed to go to that one. And throughout the years, I experimented with different, you have to go to your recitation,
Okay.
or you can go to any recitation, or you should go to your recitation, but you can switch if you need to.
Okay.
And there are trade-offs to each of those approaches.
And that's once a week lecture, once a week recitation?
Twice a week lecture, 1 additional 15-minute recitation scheduled separately.
Okay. And what are they doing in those meetings?
Typically... Well, that also we experimented with.
Uh-huh.
So typically they'll do activities. So we'll sometimes, be doing a particular topic, and we'll be doing sensation and perception, let's say. And so in recitation, they would do a flavor demonstration and tactile demonstration. And so like distortion goggle demonstration. So they would do different stations and learn about these different principles and fill out a worksheet and turn it in and, to solidify their lecture learning. Another year we tried to reinvent recitation to be, where they designed, the class was structured in these 2-week chunks. And so in the first week, they would design a little miniature research study. And then the following week, they would come back and try out their study on another group. And the other group would try it out on them. They would collect data from, 8 people themselves in their other group. And then they would sort of do a very back of the envelope calculation and say, did it support the hypothesis? And so they did, I want to say like 5 of these little mini experiments throughout the semester. And, other times we had it more like the traditional idea of a recitation is sometimes students will do like a workbook, and you sit down, you come to class, you do your workbook, you leave. So we've done things a little bit more like that, like just practicing with the content. And, to be honest, in a class of that size, it resonated for some students no matter what we did. It fell flat for some students no matter what we did. Yeah. One thing that we discovered, though, is that there were issues across, right? So I have a section of 400-ish students, but there are these other sections as well. And we had an issue where some students were doing recitation and some students weren't. That caused all sorts of confusion across these different sections. And so rather than add recitation to the sections that didn't have it, which we just don't have the classroom space to add another 15 or 20 recitations for all these other sections. What we ended up doing is moving all of the recitations for all of the sections online. So they're online asynchronous now. And So they're doing activities most of the time. They will do little mini data collection and report on it. For the personality unit, I don't know. Are you familiar with Sam Gosling's work on Snoop?
No.
Ooh, it's so much fun. So
Okay.
the idea is that you can learn about people's like big 5 personality traits by observing their stuff and their physical situation. So you can learn, you go to a student's dorm room, look at their books, look at how messy their bed is, look at the photos they have on the wall, and you can to some extent infer their big 5 characteristics. And there's like research and readings about this. So for the personality unit for this online recitation, we have them read a short article about Gosling's work. And then I say, go snoop with permission on somebody else. And this can be, a friend, a roommate, a sibling if you're at home. This can be somebody's social media profile, right? Choose somebody and take with fresh eyes a look at who they might be based on their space. And they come back and they report on it and they say, what can you tell? What can't you tell? What misleading cues might you have picked up on? Those kinds of things.
I'm laughing here because my wife and I, we've been married like coming 15 years. And I can't believe I didn't have her take a big 5 personality test before this. But she took it. Her conscientious score was like 4 out of 100.
Oh my gosh.
Like 4. And I'm like at 90 or something crazy. I don't know. Maybe not quite that high, but I'm really high. And then we had our families take them, like our families of origin. And all my family are like high, 80 and 80 plus. My accountant sister, I think, scored full, like conscientious
as
or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, and this is one of the brief, big 5 tests, but and her family, I don't think any of them scored over 20 on it. And then, so now, but the Snoop thing is, she's going to love that I'm telling this story. We moved to a new house like a year ago. And on her side of the bed, there was just like, she loves to read, loves having lots of books, but the books started like piling up and then they'd get knocked over because we have like a cat and a 9-year-old. And then eventually, like, they were just starting to like layers of things on her floor to the point where to get out of like bed or whatever, she was shuffling down the end of the bed instead of the side.
Because there's not a clear path there.
And then, I'm not an extremely patient person, but she's asked me and stuff like that, like give her time because it's like we had just moved in and stuff like that and stuff. So like a year in, almost to the day, I said, "Hey, do you think that it would be okay for us to tidy up this, like your side of things or whatever?" So anyway. I think snooping would work in this case.
Yes, conscientiousness you can usually tell pretty well, and extroversion you can tell pretty well.
Oh my gosh. What would give away extroversion?
So the cues that people tend to look for that is look at photographs and look at art on the wall. So if you see lots and lots of people in the photos, especially if it's the person and a bunch of friends or family members, that's usually a fairly, the environment in which the photo was taken versus lots of nature images or pictures of cats or things like that, or architectural pictures.
Oh, fun.
There's a lot more to it, but it's a lot of fun. The first time I did that exercise was in a small honors class, and bless them, my colleagues, this is when I was an adjunct at Nebraska Wesleyan. And so I asked my colleagues ahead of time, could I let students come to your office during class and just look around, not touch anything, but just spend a minute looking around to take notes on what they observe? And bless them, they agreed. And so my class, trooped down the hallway and they each looked, 5 of them looked in each faculty member's office and took notes. And I think maybe my colleagues did the TP, the 10-item personality inventory, and had students make guesses about what these faculty members were like based on their office spaces. Yeah.
Is that where Randy Ernst was Wesleyan?
I think so. Yeah. We didn't overlap.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, I went down a rabbit trail there, but
that's okay.
So you've tried a bunch of different things with these students, and did you like just trying new things? Is that something like you do?
Yes. I mean, that is what keeps teaching fresh for me, is trying new things. But it also stems from a feeling of frustration sometimes, right? I'm not getting them. They're not getting this content. What do I do differently? Yeah. And so it's sort of a double-edged sword for me, because I tend to take it on myself and say, what more can I do? How else can I deliver this? What new activities could I produce or come up with to help them with this idea? And I think to some extent, there might be something else going on, that it's not all me.
Right.
And so one of the things I've really been trying to challenge myself to do is change one thing, not change all of the things. Yeah. And, that's really how we, I think that maybe... was that in Doug Bernstein's Bye Bye Intro article, the incremental approach to teaching improvement. Don't change everything. Yeah. That's untenable. You get burned out. So try changing one thing, collect data, see how it goes, change one more thing. That's a tough lesson for me to have learned. But yeah, in the 6 years I've taught the course, I've reinvented it several times. And I said when I first started teaching it, I had 4 graduate TAs, and we had some issues in the department having insufficient GTAs because more people are getting bought out on research funding. So we actually now have a program of undergraduate learning assistants, LAs, with tremendous thanks to Missy Beers talked to me and shared some of her insights into it. The folks at Missouri State, they gave some fantastic advice. I talked to folks at Florida. I talked to it was such a tremendous, the STP group totally stepped in and said, yes, we would love to share our resources and insights and materials with you. So we have now done that. We rolled it out in 2019, 2020. So we had, LAs trained in the fall who, were supporting these in-person recitations. They were doing the job of graduate TAs. It was fantastic. And they did an excellent job. And then in spring 2020, of course, the world fell apart. And so we scrapped the face-to-face recitations and we moved everything online. And these undergrad LAs just stepped up. They were so professional, and they kept the class running when the students were in misery and they were experiencing significant life distress. And then the following year, we moved to fully online recitations. And so we reinvented the recitation experience yet again. And the LAs bounced off with it, and they kept going. And they have just been a tremendous source of pride and support. I mean, the LAs, shout out to the LAs. They have been fantastic. So if anybody listens to this and you're like, I'm wondering about an LA program, feel free to hit me up. It has been one of the best things to come out of this intro psych class. I'm hearing this more and more from folks in your position. Yeah. That it's a good way forward. Yes. I probably don't understand all the reasons why, but this is good insight as to why it worked for you. And the skills they get, the opportunity they get. And then also they are creating things and giving feedback and getting access to you, and they are closer to their peers, right? They know what works, or I could imagine that an example I give and they're like, no, Garth, you're old now. Yep, that doesn't work with today's students. Exactly, I get that a lot. Yeah, we definitely use a near peer model. And I found that most students are much more willing to talk to their LA or to say, I don't understand this concept, or can you just help me with this one thing? Where students tend to come to me with, I have a litany of issues that I've been holding on to. Yeah. And so I think students are much more willing to just reach out very quickly, very briefly to the LA. Whereas for me, they say, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm sorry to disturb you. I know you have 400 students. I'm like, I'm here for you. Not, you don't get 1/400th of my attention. Let me know what you need. So that is a challenge. What's your communication? How are they invited to communicate with the LAs and with you? Is it via email? Do you guys have some Slack? What do you have? Oh, Slack would be great, but we have email is the primary tool. Everybody also has drop-in hours, either face-to-face or Zoom or student's choice. So between myself, this fall I had 10 LAs in the course. And then we also have a group of psychology tutors. So between me and the LAs and the tutors, we probably had 50 hours of drop-in hours that students could visit with us in real time. So we have that. And we also have a group me that an LA manages, so that there's an LA on it. So she's able to see what comes in if there's anything inappropriate or problematic, but I'm not on it. And I tell the students, I don't have to know what you're writing. Feel free to ask for help about anybody want to do a study group this week, even if it's the night before the exam. Like, I'm not going to see that. And so they can feel free to be a little bit more honest in the group me chat.
Okay. Great. So was that a model you inherited, or have you, I know that you've adjusted things to like move those sessions online, but the whole intro psych program there, did you inherit a lot of it, or did you build a lot of it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I knew the answer as soon as I said it. Yes, of course.
Like the course has been structured similarly, like in terms of the 2 lectures and 1 recitation in person with 4 graduate TAs. That has been, since time immemorial. And that was how I did it the first couple of years. But then we had a snafu, like I said, with not having enough GTAs. And at the same time, our institution has been really trying to promote experiential learning. And we have a large number of our students interested in graduate school seeking experiential opportunities. And so the idea of sort of adding experiential opportunities for upper level, fantastic, really strong students to be mentors to these usually first year, first semester students, who many of whom are not psych majors, some of them may become psych majors, was just such a great opportunity that, and I will say this is not at all anything that I did by myself. All of the POPs together really worked on this. And so it was very much a collaborative experience.
Did the POPs take different courses on, or is it all intro psych?
No, we do different things. So Amanda, Chelsea, and I have historically taught intro. Jackie is going to be teaching it sort of in the near future, since I'm stepping back from intro for a while. And then, Amanda is going to be teaching some statistics and methods going forward. And Chelsea teaches diversity and social, and Jackie teaches biology, behavior. So like we kind of have different areas of emphasis. But we all at some point do intro. And at this point in our department, we are the only ones who teach intro.
Oh, okay.
Just the 4 of us.
Yep. But things are changing for you, it sounds like. So,
yes.
Well, you take a drink. I'll keep talking.
Sorry.
No. That's fine. So, tell me about the beginning of this shift and what's next here.
Yes. So I'm not sure what's next, but so as I mentioned, this intro psych class is constantly evolving. There's lots and lots of moving parts. Such a huge class, just a tremendous amount of class management effort. And so after doing it for 6 years, I'm kind of just burned out on the experience. And so I'm getting out of the rotation, and it's not exactly clear what it will be replaced with. I applied for a sabbatical for next year, so that's a little bit of a question mark. So if I get this, if I get the faculty development fellowship, then I'll be out of the rotation entirely for a year, then I'll come back. But intro is not my only class. I also teach I teach a senior level, it's actually 400, 800 cross-listed advanced social psych class, which is my baby, and I love it. And
That's your area, I imagine?
Yeah, social psych, yes. And then I do another 400, 800 cross-listed motivation and emotion class that Manda and I sort of rotate taking on. So,
and how big are those classes?
They're capped at 40, so usually between 20 and 40.
And what's your teaching load then?
7 courses a year. But intro counts as extra because it's a humongous class.
But how many does it count as?
2, but then I also do an honor section. So like last year, what year is this? 2021, I taught intro plus the honor section intro in the fall plus advanced social in the fall. And then spring, I did intro, motivation and emotion, and advanced social psych. So those are my 7.
Okay. Okay. So is that teaching load from your perspective, is it like a reasonable teaching load? Is it a lot, or is it a lot because you put a lot into your work and what you do?
I think that hits the nail on the head. It is a lot. But it's, it's not like 7 times as much as a colleague who teaches 1 class a year, right? Because I'm constantly innovating in all of my classes. I like to say I never teach the same class twice. And so even in, I just updated my CV the other day, and I have a running tally of how many times I've taught all my courses. I've taught I've taught intro 37 times or something. And yet every time I do it, I'm changing something. I'm changing some structural element. And in any given day of lecture, I'm probably changing, a couple little things. And so it's never done, which is nice because it's constantly evolving. But again, with the setting boundaries and setting limits, that's something that I personally need to work on because it is there's so much out there. And somebody in a talk yesterday mentioned drinking from a fire hose, and that really is how it can feel, especially with intro psych. There's so much out there. And so it's really difficult for me sometimes to say, I'm going to stop here, even though I know there's probably a better activity I could use, or I could make these instructions clearer, or I could substitute that paper option for this paper option. So it's really, really hard for me to say, this is good enough.
Right. Well, it's amazing for somebody who feels a little tired right now.
Yeah.
You are still very excited about the work and talking about it like it comes across for sure. So, it'll be interesting to see when you get some rest, like what will occur to you. I don't know. I think that it's really hard to set those boundaries for ourselves. What does a typical work week look like for you? Do you, or did it, or does it, whatever? Maybe I'll just leave it open-ended.
Yeah, I have been doing better this year at setting boundaries. Let's say maybe 2 years ago, I was doing the thing that I think a lot of faculty are very used to, working 7 days a week, working into the evenings, constantly checking your email on your phone, right? You're at a kids' soccer game and you pull out your phone just to see oh my God, there's an emergency email I have to respond to. I've been doing a little bit better recently at saying, nope, I'm going to put my phone away, or at least I'm not doing work things on my phone. But I've been trying recently, and I've been doing a little bit better at keeping sort of probably like a 9 to 5:30 kind of a schedule. And only working a couple of hours on the weekend and then saying, okay, I'm done. I've also gotten a lot better at structuring specific periods of time, and I tend to try to keep the same structure every week. So I'll say on Fridays, I need to make sure I do my announcement for the next week for all 3 classes, and I don't know roughly how long that's going to take. And then I set up the next week's Canvas module or whatever, and that's my Friday task list.
Okay. All right. So what does service look like for you? Because I know you've done some things. How are you involved kind of maybe even at the local level with your institution, but also nationally? What are you up to?
So locally, I mentioned Faculty Senate. Yeah. I'm on the Senate at my university. I've been doing that for 5 years. And I know it's the sort of thing that people are like, more meetings. And it really is just lots of meetings. But honestly, that has been a tremendously helpful experience for me because it's kind of the only exposure I have to the rest of the university outside of my department. So it's excellent. It's so helpful to know what's going on in different departments and different colleges. What are the changes coming down the pipeline? And then to be able to bring that to my colleagues in my department and say, just so you know, this change is coming from the administration. So would you like to have an opinion about it? Would you like me to voice that opinion? And so that's been really, really cool. So I would advocate for that for people who have something similar. I also I coordinate my department's teaching brown bag. which we hilariously call SPLAT, which stands for Strengthening Psychology Teaching and Learning. I just had to come up with a ridiculous name for it. So SPLAT. So we organize that, and faculty and sometimes graduate students come in and do presentations. And our last presentation in fall was I want to say somebody from the Executive Vice Chancellor's office came in and did a session on compassionate teaching. So it was right at the end of this really intense fall semester. I think we were feeling really burned out. Students were feeling really burned out. And there was a lot of sort of, resentment and contention. Like, why should I give you more flexibility? I've already given you so much flexibility and you just keep taking and take. Like, I felt like in my conversations with colleagues, there was this sense of, I'm tired of being compassionate. Like, I'm compassion fatigued out.
Yeah.
And so that talk was a nice moment in the penultimate week of the semester to say, why are we doing this? And sort of think about, how do we set up ourselves not to burn out? How do we set up our students to be compassionate, but within reason, right? And one of the things that this speaker said that resonated with a lot of us was compassion and compassionate teaching is not equivalent to saying yes to everything. It is not giving unlimited deadlines and unlimited flexibility, because sometimes the compassionate thing is to say, no, I really need you to get this done because it's for your benefit. Sort of like the best parents are not the parents who say yes to everything. So I think that was a moment of wisdom that helped me in that really sort of difficult end of the semester push. And then now, as I'm thinking about preparing for my spring classes starting in a couple of weeks, I'm saying, okay, how can I be compassionate, but not in a way that I don't want to give students too much rope, but I want to give them some give and take, some flexibility. So how do we build that compassion into what we do? That was a long way of saying I teach I help coordinate the teaching brown bag.
Great.
And I do various other things on campus.
And then nationally, what are you up to?
Nationally, so I'm really excited to start to be joining the APA Introductory Psychology Initiative. So as you know, we're sort of starting to plan I don't know if that's public knowledge yet. Can we talk about that?
I think, it's fine. I think, it's coming down. Yeah. Okay. So
sort of planning an intro psych initiative based virtual conference for next summer.
Yeah.
So that's sort of in the early planning stages and thinking about what that might look like. So folks who are interested in the IPI, stay tuned.
Yeah.
I'm also doing one of the IPI book clubs. So reading that Transforming Introductory Psychology book and kind of working through it with faculty members around the country. And I've done a couple of these small faculty book clubs for various purposes through STP or through other organizations. I organized one a couple of years ago on the book Small Teaching Online. So in summer 2020, when everybody was getting ready for this fall transition, I helped coordinate and run a faculty book club. And that was so fantastic. We had over 100 participants representing, 4 or 5 different countries, mostly United States. But
it also just shows you how desperate people were at that time, right? They needed some support.
We
did that book as well, and it was great.
It was just the perfect time. So that experience, I'm such a believer in book clubs that you really get into it deeply and you're thinking about it, but more importantly, you're discussing it and getting different ideas from different people.
Yeah, well, it's that lifelong learning piece, right? That we never, if we're curious about teaching, we never stop changing things, and you want to be hearing the new ideas, which is why folks like you and I keep showing up to places like this, is because, I had this thought years ago that if you just show up, you will be transformed by the people at these places, because there's something that they all have in common about curiosity, about being excellent, about being better, making changes,
And they give it away. That's the thing that just is so striking. I have heard stories in other disciplines where people tend to be really protective of their teaching materials or their methods. And here, somebody gives a talk and they say, please hit me up. I want to share. Let's talk. Let's have lunch. And I don't think in the time that I've been involved in this conference or ACT that anybody has ever said no, or I don't want to share that with you, or let me talk to somebody else first and get permission. It's just yes, please.
Yeah.
I would be delighted to help you. And they're legitimately delighted to help you.
Right. Yeah. And you ran into some good folks in Missy and Danae and Brooke.
Yes.
And yes. I mean, we all have in that community.
Yeah. I've run into Regan. I mean, he's been so helpful as well.
You know, I would imagine
Eric.
that in what you do for large sections of intro psych, there's not that many people in that position. I was just talking to Janelle before you, and she's at the University of Oklahoma doing the same thing. And then we've mentioned some other folks. It's a different beast than, than what most of us do, you know? So yeah, it's cool that within STP, because we have so many members, you do get enough representation that you can have these small kind of these like cohorts of people who are doing, very specific things. Like community college representation at STP is wonderful. This is like I can find great help there for what is particular to, our kinds of students. So, okay. So you are doing that. When did you start getting involved in STP?
I don't know.
Or APA? How did that all come about for you?
Gosh, it's been several years now. I think probably when I think the first night hop I ever attended was in 2016, when I worked at Bellevue University. And, they had some professional development money. I said, well, there's this conference I've heard of. It sounds cool. And, for a while I was very almost compulsively into the STP Facebook page, checking things out, sharing materials, asking for help. And again, it's that, yes, I would be happy to help you. And because it's such a large and vibrant community, somebody has been in that situation before. Somebody has had that issue before. Somebody has some materials, and then they're willing to share their insight and their stuff with you.
Perfect.
The other thing I wanted to say, just as a shout out, I'm working in the STP's Midcareer mentorship program. Like we're trying to forming a working group to try to create materials and support for that mid-career transition and for mid-career folks. So, of course, the STP has an excellent early career professionals program that I participated in, and I got some travel funding through. So they're fantastic, such a supportive group of folks. Yeah. And so now STP is adding materials and programming and support for that mid-career area as well. So
that's cool. Yeah, that's where I find myself too. So and I never, like when I got into STP, I don't think, and I think it maybe is, there could be a lot of things going on, but I never really got involved with that early career group. I think I had a weird thing where I was an adjunct for a long time. Yeah. And then so you were like, I was like, trying to figure out when I did get a tenure track. Yeah. Well, and when I did get a tenure track position, I'm like, what am I now? Am I like early or mid or what's going on? But I think I'm firmly in mid now. But what do you all have planned for that?
So there was oh gosh, I wish I had refreshed my memory right before our conversation.
That's fine.
But they had a working group do a survey, like a national survey of STP members, and say, what career stage are you in? What demographics do you represent? What's your institution? What support do you need? Like, what kinds of things do you need from STP? And so then that working group sort of finished up their sort of summary and recommendations and said, here's what our members really would like to see. And so now I'm in this second working group, and we're trying to start to put together actual programming based on the recommendations from the first group. So, one of the things that we're actually going to meet next week for the first time to sort of, since we started doing the actual work of the working group. So one thing that we're planning to do is reading groups of small groups, cohorts of faculty to look at materials that are written for mid-career, so like identify the major issues, identify the major concerns, and then sort of form different breakout discussion groups for different populations. So if you are interested in maybe moving into an administrative role, what resources are available for you? If you have made the really hard, fast push to promotion, now you're promoted, what do you do with the now what feeling that is so common among mid-career faculty? What do you do with a sabbatical, right? What is that supposed to look like? So we're gathering those materials and hoping to form these communication circles among faculty who are interested in those different topics.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So you have applied for sabbatical. I am up for sabbatical, and
Yay!
I have to apply by the end of January. So I've been thinking a lot about that. Lots of consideration. But what do you need to promise to the institution? Like what's the deal there, and how do you approach it?
That is a great question, and it's a little bit hard to answer because despite the fact, maybe because I'm at a large R1 institution and the professor of practice role is relatively new, I asked around, I asked my associate dean, I asked other faculty members. To my knowledge, to any of their knowledge, nobody has applied for a teaching-oriented sabbatical. I am the first.
Yay.
And yeah, so I really don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if I'm going to get it or not, because it's, this one teaching sabbatical and all of these traditional research oriented, and scholarly sabbaticals.
What did you propose? Do you mind talking about it?
So the first prong is revamping introductory psychology to be consistent with the IPI, to bring in more diversity, to bring in more scientific reasoning skills. So to sort of think a little bit more holistically about the course that I've done over the last 6 years and say, what has worked well, what hasn't, what is consistent with the IPI. And then my hope is that even though I won't be teaching the humongous sections going forward, I'm still hoping to do learning community sections or honor sections or, other smaller sections of the course. And so how do I, instead of saying, holy crap, I have to teach 400 students in a month, I have to go, do some backward planning.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping to reinvent the course and make something that I really am proud of, very happy to do, instead of something that gets sort of thrown together semester after semester. So that's one prong. My second prong is to do more infusion of DEI, diversity, and equity inclusion. Yes, thank you. Across all of my classes. So that's again sort of been something that I sort of I don't have time to do this in a really holistic way. So I'll tack something on. And it's just, that's not doing justice to what we really need to do.
Yeah.
And so trying to do, again, backward planning, trying to say, here are the outcomes I want. And here's how I can really infuse those items throughout the course and make the course more equity-minded, instead of just saying, oh, and by the way, this pioneering researcher happened to be in this community, right? That's a very token way of addressing diversity. And I don't want to do that. I want to do it in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that I'm planning to do is sort of a great instructors model or great professors model. So learn more about what distinguishes a good professor from the life-changing professors out there. And so there are some books out there. There are clearly within psychology some folks who are just deeply respected, widely renowned for their teaching and for changing lives, not just teaching well.
Mm-hmm.
And so my hope is to do some reading, do some interviewing, potentially visit some campuses and shadow some of those faculty members and say, okay, what makes you different from somebody who's a good teacher, but not an amazing, life-changing teacher?
Yeah. Well, I hope it gets funded. That would be great.
It feels like a lot.
It does. Yeah. And
really
but that's the full year, right?
Yes.
Okay. What a cool opportunity to have these sabbaticals, because you've never had one, right?
I have not. I've never had the opportunity before.
Yeah, me either. And so, yeah, it's one of the, we definitely pour out a lot in our field is hard in, there's people who do other jobs that are hard.
Mm-hmm.
And those jobs have other upsides. And this is one of the great upsides of some of our jobs. And, I don't think it's a given either that people get sabbaticals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, did we miss talking about anything that you want to get into? Here's a question that I always want to ask, and that is when did you decide that you wanted to teach?
I decided that I wanted to teach So actually, I do not have a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Oh.
My bachelor's degree is philosophy. And so I was one of those students who was very swayed by the personality of the person who was teaching the class.
Yeah.
And so my freshman year on campus, bless him, my favorite professor of all time, I had an 8 a.m. philosophy class, and my dorm room was about 5 minutes away from the classroom. So I would like roll out of bed, usually late because I'm a perpetually late person, run across campus, come into the class a couple minutes, slink in and kind of sit in my desk. And the professor was this just, I don't know. He sort of looked like Einstein in terms of the hair, like kind of old and crotchety, just like sort of a wild-eyed dude, but just so deeply funny, deeply passionate, compassionate, and he and I just clicked. And a lot of the students were like, "Oh man, he's so crabby," and I'm like, he's hilarious." And so he and I just connected interpersonally, and it was an elective class. But then I took another philosophy class and another philosophy and another. And so eventually I declared a philosophy major, and I became a TA for him. And my favorite class that I took as an undergrad was actually formal logic. So learning about modus ponens and modus tollens and, developing that very logical ability to look at an argument and say, that's actually fallacious. It doesn't make sense, right? Served me really well in my psychology classes because I was a psych minor. And then I think I was a second semester sophomore, I took my first psychology class, Intro to Psych, with another kind of older, kind of crotchety white male professor. And he was another one that everybody else was like, "Oh, he's so boring. All he ever does is, lecture." But I thought his lectures were the most fascinating thing. Yeah. And this was at a time when, people weren't necessarily, like active learning wasn't as big a deal as it is now. And so I found his work so exciting, and I felt delighted to be treated as an adult, right? Yeah. Like he's giving us this like high level work. And so I loved it. And so I think it was the combination of those two professors in their different fields that said, man, they do some amazing stuff. They make their students love their content area. And what could be better than that?
Yeah. That's really neat to hear. It's often the case that it's like an instructor or a teacher that changes our path or inspires us to do something.
Yes.
In so many conversations, I've heard that. And then my final question is just how then did you decide to go to grad school in psychology?
I didn't know what I wanted to do after college.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, with a philosophy major, I went to a small liberal arts college. We didn't have a great career center. So I really didn't know what can you do with a philosophy degree. Mm-hmm. And I knew you could do some stuff with a psychology degree, but I didn't have a psychology degree. And I knew I didn't want to go into counseling as most of my peers did. I knew I didn't want to go into corrections as some of my peers did. And so I said, well, combining my love of the classroom, my inspiration from these two faculty members, shout out to Dr. Walters and Dr. Peters. Actually learned Dr. Walters was my philosophy professor, and I learned a couple of years ago that he had passed. And I was devastated. Like I hadn't talked to him in years, but I was devastated because I was like, he was the driving force behind who I am. Wow. And
so important for us to let those folks know that before. Right.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And then I guess I said, well, I was married, and I said, well, my husband is in graduate school. I'm not ready to leave education. I love learning more. And so I just kind of kept going.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Just to see where it would lead?
Just to see where it would lead. I mean, I guess I sort of thought I would like to do more psychology. I hadn't really done much research. Mm-hmm. I did my research project in philosophy because that was my major. But I hadn't done any psychology research until my first semester of graduate school, and I hit the ground running.
Yeah, that was a lot of my experience as well.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I know that you and I both have shuttles to catch. We have to go fly around the country now. So better luck with your trip home, because I know that it was quite a challenge to get here.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I think maybe the weather has subsided. So Carolyn, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing what you do. And I wish you a good rest. I hope that you get the sabbatical and that you come back refreshed in whatever that is, 2023.
Oh my gosh, that feels like so far in the future.
But that's the great thing about it.
Yes. Thanks so much. It was a delight.
Thanks.